Allora, ci risiamo, vediamo se la webcam si è sistemata. Okay, perfetto, perfetto. Allora, intanto do il benvenuto a Darwin86 che ha scritto per la prima volta in chat, anche se prima che staccassi la live e la facessi ripartire. Questo è il sabotaggio di Pietro, che non solo spamma i canali della concorrenza, no scherzo, un saluto a Mario e a Ruger che sono in live su Dungeon Dice, anzi magari dopo gli facciamo un raidino se sono ancora in live quando stacchiamo. Era un po' che non facevo live da solo qui per Dissidenza, effettivamente fa un po' strano ogni volta quando uno si ferma per tanto tempo e riprende dopo un po', fa strano, fa strano. Allora, ora che si sono sistemate le cose a livello tecnico, io direi, visto che sono già 38 e i primi 10 minuti praticamente di Dissidenza ce li siamo fumati a risolvere problemi tecnici, introduco direttamente la live di stasera. Allora, l'idea per la live di stasera parte da un video in particolare che avevo visto un po' di tempo fa, un video di un canale che si chiama Stylized, no credo Stylized Station, che parla di videogiochi per lo più, e che in realtà è un video che m'è capitato sott'occhio molto tecnico, che parla proprio di come viene realizzata l'acqua a livello tecnico nei videogiochi. Che è un video di 9 minuti, poco meno di 9 minuti, quindi relativamente breve per le nostre tempistiche, che appunto si concentra molto più sugli aspetti tecnici che su quelli più, come dire, generali dei videogiochi e dei livelli acquatici. Da lì poi ho cercato un altro video, o almeno un altro video avevo cercato, ne ho trovato uno anche bello lungo, di un altro canale che si chiama Ghost Charm, tra l'altro anche abbastanza recente, perché di solo 4 mesi fa, che dura 34 minuti invece, quindi insomma quasi un record per Dissidenza Critica. Che diciamo l'aspetto tecnico lo tocca solo marginalmente, si concentra più su altri discorsi relativi alla rappresentazione dell'acqua nei videogiochi. Ora, dico, io avevo scritto anche il post che alla fine è uscito solo su Instagram oggi. Diciamo che la riflessione sui videogiochi e sull'acqua, parte dall'idea che ormai è quasi un meme quello i livelli acquatici, che palle i livelli acquatici in generale nei videogiochi, perché magari i controlli sono quello che sono, molto spesso sono un po' ingessati quando sei sott'acqua, perché magari i modi per rappresentare l'acqua e l'essere sott'acqua nei videogiochi, li associamo magari a certi, anche in un certo senso, certi traumi infantili. Ehm, Però in generale, ad esempio, una cosa, avevo scritto in una prima bozza del post e poi è uscito oggi e in realtà poi nel post non insomma non l'abbiamo messa più, riguardava il fatto, cioè io per esempio l'acqua nei videogiochi l'associo sempre a Super Mario 64 e a Dire Dire Docks, che era la soundtrack, di credo di più di un livello subacqueo di Super Mario 64. Al di là che in Super Mario 64 secondo me, nonostante l'età, i controlli rimangono eccezionali anche nei livelli subacquei. Ehm, ma comunque cioè questa musica qua, proprio Dire Dire Docks, boh, è incredibile, è una delle soundtrack a cui sono più affezionato in tutto il mondo dei videogiochi. Quindi in realtà Cioè, io non mi rivedo tantissimo in questo meme dei livelli acquatici, quindi diciamo da questa cosa è partita un po' questa idea di fare un Dissidenza dedicato a questo. Ehm, Anche perché penso anche, per dire, ai primi Tomb Raider, comunque ci sono un po' cresciuto, anche lì ci giocava mio padre, ehm scusate. Ehm, Stavo dicendo, ci sono un po' cresciuto coi primi Tomb Raider, anche lì mi ricordo i livelli acquatici avevano una certa rilevanza, comunque erano presenti abbastanza spesso. Per cui niente, ho detto: "Ci vediamo un paio di video, ci facciamo una chiacchierata su questi argomenti qua e vediamo insomma che piega prende il discorso, che piega prende la chiacchiera." Quindi niente, direi che cominciamo. E allora fatemi controllare un attimo una cosa. Mh. Okay. Allora, vi aggiungo la schermata. Condividi, screen. No, è questa qua. Quindi okay. Condividi. Cominciamo prima con il video relativo, cioè il video un po' più tecnico, che vi ripeto è un video di Stylized, Station. Ehm, boh, è molto tecnico su come funziona proprio la rappresentazione dell'acqua e dei livelli acquatici nei videogiochi. Ce lo vediamo, sono 9 minuti, cerco di non interrompere troppo, anche perché dopo abbiamo un video più lungo, quindi insomma vediamo un po'. Dai, via col video.
Hi, I'm Thomas, and on my channel, I love exploring the relationship between art and technology in video games. And like most of us, I was really inspired by Cyberpunk's incredible cutting edge water physics,
Ciao
and started
Brief.
to get really curious about how water works in other cutting edge AAA games like Sea of Thieves and Assassin's Creed Black Flag. So I decided to spend the past month researching and experimenting how water works in video games. What I discovered is that there is a ton of smoke and mirrors going on behind the scenes in all of the water of your favorite games, and I want to share what I've learned with you from my research and experiments, and also talk about some of the cutting edge water tech currently in modern video games. This is going to be a fun video. This video is totally sponsor free thanks to everyone supporting me on Patreon. We had a few
Vabbè,
joiners
ringrazio i
this week,
Patreon,
so
cazzi e
thank you
mazzi.
very much.
Evito di
No!
mandare avanti, stoppare perché
Money.
insomma rischiamo.
Let's get one of the big main questions out of the way first. Why is water so hard to do right in video games in the first place? Why can't we just simulate water particles? The answer is that simulating real-time water is still really hard to do. This is a big enough topic on its own, but the short explanation is that pretty much all games have to prioritize making at least 30 to 60 frames a second for their performance. Combine this with different generation consoles and graphics cards becoming more expensive than some used cars, compromises must be made for the sake of smooth gameplay. So rather than accurately modeled liquid, most games use creative cheats where textures, VFX, sprites, normal maps, and basic geometry are smashed together to give the illusion of flowing water. Let's take a look at some of those more interesting techniques.
Vabbè, scusate.
For those of you who are new to game art, you may have never heard of normal maps before. Normal maps are a type of bump map. They are a special kind of texture that allows you to add surface detail such as bumps, grooves, and scratches that catch the light as if they are represented by real geometry. But in reality, it's just a flat plane. If you look closely at most games, you'll find normal maps are used all over the place, even in modern games that are coming out now. So what's so special?
Okay, in pratica una normal map è in realtà una deformazione, più o meno, di come la luce viene rappresentata nell'impattare un piano, su cui c'è una texture, per simulare il fatto che quel piano non sia un piano, ma ci sia effettivamente un volume, ci siano dei poligoni, ci sia, come dire, una protuberanza, una spaccatura, qualcosa proprio di solido, di fisico. Quindi è appunto a livello computazionale, è più conveniente che metterci effettivamente dei poligoni, oltre al fatto che i poligoni poi richiedono anche una modellazione, comunque una lavorazione, ehm, è più semplice e meno pesa meno sulle prestazioni.
Special about normal maps, and why am I talking about them? Well, if you know what you're doing, normal maps can also be applied for a cool little trick when you're creating water. If I use a simple node setup in Unreal Engine, I can use multiple normal maps and pan the textures in opposite directions to get a basic water shader. These normal maps do a great job at faking the micro details of waves and ripples you see on a large body of water without having to actually simulate anything. It's just moving two
Okay, l'idea qual è? Si usano le normal maps che si muovono, possibilmente si muovono in 2 direzioni contrastanti, per, simulare su un piano fermo, che poi è il piano dell'acqua, simulare l'effetto delle onde e delle increspature. Quindi proprio, come dire, viene simulato con queste normal maps l'effetto delle onde, però in realtà è un piano, proprio banalmente.
simple textures over our plane, and our monkey brains fill in the rest of the details for us. Pretty cool, right? By the way, if you want to learn more about Unreal Engine, you can check out my course where I teach you how to create full, beautiful environments using Unreal Engine. And you can also
Qui
check my stylized
sponsorizza
texturing course as well.
una roba
I'll
che ha
leave a link
fatto lui
below.
su Unreal Engine
This
per imparare
technique
a
can
usare
be
Unreal
found all
Engine.
over the water in your favorite games, from older games like Half-Life 2 to more modern games like Uncharted 4 or Far Cry 5 and the cutting-edge Cyberpunk. A lot of this magic is just simple textures scrolling over some simple geometry. Let's talk about another really important aspect of water. It's caustics.
Le
You know
caustiche.
those shimmering patterns of light you see on the bottom of a pool? Or the strange light images created when light shines through a glass of water? Those are caustics. Due to the reflection and refraction occurring on water waves, water acts like a giant warping magnifying glass that creates those light patterns that you see at the bottom of the pool. Now, I get it, this seems complicated, but this technique can be done or faked pretty easily. All you have to really do is, just like the normal maps, is pan an emissive texture on the bottom of where your water floor is. Then add a simple distortion and dissolve effect, and you can simulate caustics pretty easily with a bit of tweaking. For bonus brownie points, you can add a distortion effect on the surface of the water to mimic refraction as well. But Thomas, you say, this doesn't sound very practical. What games are going to use this? Well, the same can be said about Subnautica, which takes place almost entirely underwater and is filled with really amazing caustic effects all over the ocean's floor. This is an effect that seems like it's a small detail, but if it wasn't there, players would know something is missing. So, combining moving normal maps, refraction, caustics, and some simple VFX like water particles and sea spray is more than enough to create a decent water shader from a simple plane. And it does seem like tons of games do this. There's also a lot of other stuff we could talk about, like depth, specularity, God rays, and reflectivity, but you get the idea. A lot of work goes into these. Now, I know what you're thinking. These techniques work really well for flat and calmer areas of water, but what about modern games, where water is more dynamic and reacts to other objects? This is where I found things get a little more interesting. So it turns out there's a lot of ways to make fake moving water, but one of the best ways to do it, and one of the most common ways, is a method called vertex displacement. Vertex displacement makes it possible to control the positions of a mesh's vertices via a shader. The CPU maintains the original positions of the mesh's vertices, but it passes those values to the GPU to be presented to our eyeballs. Those vertex positions are then hijacked and displaced by the shader, creating new geometry. This technique of vertex displacement can be applied to the actual geometry of the water. Instead of having a flat plane with moving textures, you could now have moving, flowing geometry. Now, this may sound complicated, and it is, it's a little mathy, but this isn't exactly a brand new concept. The game Fear accomplished this, at least a pretty good version of it, all the way back in 2005 with some really impressive results. This method of vertex displacement can be found in many old and new games, oftentimes where player models need to walk or interact with quite a bit of water. Some games even use vertex displacement when bullets and other projectiles impact the water. Combine this effect with a simple water splash sprite and you've got a decent looking bullet impact, like in Red Dead Redemption 2. But there are some modern games that take these techniques to
Okay,
the
prima di
absolute nth.
arrivare a Sea of Thieves, che ovviamente poi è il pinnacolo tecnico della rappresentazione dell'acqua nei videogiochi. Questo sul vertex displacement è abbastanza interessante. Lui la spiega in realtà in modo abbastanza sbrigativo, però in sostanza è proprio la scheda grafica che, simula un movimento dei vertici del piano, perché alla fine è sempre un piano, ehm, andando a creare in reazione a un'interazione, quindi o a un modello che si muove sull'acqua, quindi un personaggio che si muove sull'acqua o, un proiettile, poi in base ovviamente a come i giochi sono, progettati, va a simulare solamente pesando solamente sulla GPU, non sul processore, va a simulare proprio un movimento attraverso cioè spostando i singoli vertici. Oddio, i singoli vertici in realtà poi sicuramente sotto c'è un discorso di interpolazione, cioè non va effettivamente a simulare, spostando tutti i vertici del piano, ma va a fare un'approssimazione più o meno fedele, cioè andando appunto a interpolare una segmentazione di vertici per simulare proprio un'onda, comunque una reazione al corpo estraneo nell'acqua. È una roba già uno step ulteriore, anche se appunto giustamente dice lui già c'era in FIAR nel 2005, è una roba sicuramente ormai sicuramente sdoganata e si trova in un sacco di giochi, anche se ora vedremo una cosa che fa molto ridere. Ehm a proposito di Cyberpunk. Ehm, Però è molto figo, cioè come concetto è molto figo quello proprio di a parte vabbè, io sono un informatico, quindi ovviamente mi affascina anche un po' l'idea di ingegnarsi per andare a ingannare l'occhio umano fondamentalmente che, l'acqua stia effettivamente reagendo in un modo, credibile, si stia comportando come se fosse veramente dell'acqua e in realtà è un piano, con delle texture che si muovono, con vabbè poi degli effetti eccetera, eccetera, e con semplicemente questa, distorsione, perché di fatto 'sto vertex displacement è proprio la scheda grafica che prende dei vertici sull'acqua e va a distorcere, cioè va a sollevare e abbassare dei punti di quel piano su cui sono proiettate delle texture, andando a simulare un movimento dell'acqua. È piuttosto figo. Comunque andiamo a vedere Sea of Thieves che vabbè è estremamente figo.
Level. One of the best examples of this that I can think of is Sea of Thieves. On the open water, you have these massive crashing waves that can be seen for miles. These waves are most likely procedurally created. Every
Okay,
player
sono
sees the same
procedurali.
thing, the same waves, the same currents, everything, which is impressive enough on its own. The lighting in Sea of Thieves also has an extra level of care as well. If the sun hits the water at just the right angle, you can start to see these beautiful rays of light that shine and glow just under the water's surface. And it looks especially beautiful as the sun starts to set. According to my research, this was intentionally stylized to add more color, but they also made sure that it stayed rooted in reality. Now you take all of these things and then you add some sea spray VFX and some more procedurally created foam that follows the waves, and you've got a recipe for some incredible looking seawater. There were plenty of other challenges the team most likely had to face, like how does water render from a faraway distance? How does the surface look when you are underwater? How do the shadows act when you layer it with refraction? Now, I'll most likely be doing a video on the art and tech of Sea of Thieves to answer these questions. I can only really scratch the surface in this video, so I'd love to go into more detail later. You can see a lot of these techniques in another great pirate game called Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where the water
Okay.
has a lot of the same characteristics as the Sea of Thieves water. In fact, a lot of the Assassin's Creed games like Valhalla, Odyssey, and Origins all have fantastic water tech. But Black Flag is another game that stands out as a game that has taken extra care of their water art. What really sells water isn't only the tech behind the water itself, but how the water interacts with the world around it. Take Ghost of Tsushima, for example, where spilling blood on the water in a little stream or river will cause it to diffuse and flow downstream. It makes you wonder, if multiple enemies are killed in the water, will the river turn red with blood? How far downstream will the blood flow? Will it ever get around to doing an art breakdown of Ghost of Tsushima? We will never know. And let's not forget the underwater plants in The Witcher 3, swaying like they're in a current. There is no current, but they've been animated in a way that makes it look like they are in one. It's amazing tricks like this that give in-game water much more life. You also have the amazing interactivity of water in Rockstar games like Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2, where the water reacts to essentially everything you can throw at it, like raindrops, jet skis, players swimming, and gunfire. Now, since you've watched this video all the way through, you now know about vertex displacement and have a basic idea of how this could work in game. And then you have all of these amazing games built around the idea of water that I didn't really get the chance to talk about, like Breakwater, Hydrophobia, Super Mario Sunshine, all taking different approaches to their water tech. All this amazing, incredible, creative, and innovative tech, and Cyberpunk doesn't do any of this. So yeah, water's pretty cool.
Doppi
Sì.
saldi, 50%
Alla
di sconto.
fine, vabbè, a parte i
Quello
doppi
che non ti è
saldi qua di poltrone e sofà, sì, la cosa che poi fa ridere è che Cyberpunk alla fine non fa niente di tutto ciò. Cioè, la cosa "divertente" tra virgolette, tutte queste tecniche, tutti questi studi in anni e anni di evoluzione tecnica del videogioco e alla fine Cyberpunk che appunto un po' è il pinnacolo di questi anni, alla fine non fa niente di tutto ciò, l'acqua di Cyberpunk è orribile. Vabbè, ce la prendiamo come viene. Comunque vi ho messo in chat il link al video, che appunto era un video non tanto lungo, secondo me abbastanza interessante sugli aspetti tecnici dell'acqua nei videogiochi. Avevo provato a guardare se lo stesso tizio avesse poi fatto il video che diceva di Sea of Thieves. Non mi ricordo però se alla fine lo aveva fatto oppure no, sto controllando adesso, ma mi pare di no. Uh. Tra l'altro comunque lui fa proprio tante robine tecniche su anche proprio su come fare le cose, quindi interessante. No, comunque su Sea of Thieves poi non lo ha più fatto ah no, invece sì, c'è un video di 3 minuti su Sea of Thieves, vabbè non lo vediamo, però vi metto il link anche di quello, se vi va insomma per approfondire. Sono altri 3 minuti di questo stesso tizio, quindi un ulteriore approfondimento sulla tecnica, no, può essere sicuramente interessante. Invece, quello che facciamo è passare all'altro video che abbiamo visto, che vedremo questa sera, anche perché è bello lunghetto, sono 34 minuti, quindi insomma ce lo andiamo a vedere con calma. Tra l'altro questo non l'ho visto per intero, l'ho iniziato, non ho visto metà circa, quindi anche per me alcune cose saranno nuove. Quello che voglio dire, già dopo questo primo video che parlava proprio della tecnica, che, questo meme, questa cosa dei che palle i videogiochi, che palle i livelli acquatici nei videogiochi, alla luce di tutto questo, alla luce di ora lui mostrava anche altre tecniche, così le accennava in The Witcher 3, la simulazione della corrente sott'acqua, che in realtà non è una corrente, ma sono le alghe che sono animate per far sembrare ci sia la corrente. Cioè, il fatto è quello, in 40 anni, ma mettiamo anche di meno, mettiamo da quando i videogiochi sono diventati tridimensionali, facciamo 25 anni di storia del videogioco 3D, ehm, l'evoluzione che c'è stata a livello di rappresentazione dell'acqua è impressionante, cioè veramente impressionante. Sia proprio a un occhio non approfondito, cioè andare a vedere proprio un gioco di PS1, PS2 o equivalente Nintendo, Sega, insomma altri publisher. Com'era rappresentata l'acqua e com'è rappresentata nei giochi, non dico di oggi, perché in realtà già ormai sono diversi anni, ma, cioè il progresso tecnologico è impressionante. Come si fa a snobbare, una cosa del genere, sia per il discorso di quanto è stato investito dai publisher, dalle aziende per arrivare a certi risultati di rappresentazione dell'acqua, ma anche perché proprio la dimensione acquatica è qualcosa che come esseri umani ci affascina. Io nel post che avevo scritto facevo il parallelo con Monet che faceva gli studi pittorici su come rappresentare l'acqua, il flusso dell'acqua in un certo senso. Quindi comunque è qualcosa che proprio ci tocca particolarmente, questa cosa del rappresentare l'acqua in modo verosimile. Boh, cioè qui abbiamo parlato già in questo primo video introduttivo in un certo senso, abbiamo visto come anche poi gli effetti sottomarini, cioè lui ci citava Subnautica, ci citava anche proprio giochi che praticamente esistono solo come sottomarini in un certo senso, ma anche Sea of Thieves poi ha una grossa componente di rappresentazione dell'acqua sotto il livello dell'acqua e proprio anche poi di gameplay sott'acqua. Cioè, come facciamo a dimenticarci di tutto questo e ridurre ancora l'acqua a quella cosa che sì, ci deve essere, se no, boh, che palle, che cioè non puoi andare in acqua che muori. Penso, che so, al primo Assassin's Creed o anche a giochi più recenti, che l'acqua ci deve essere e deve essere anche guardabile, però non troppo, però i livelli sott'acqua no, che poi sono noiosi, sono brutti. Cioè, c'è una sorta di quasi di ipocrisia, mi verrebbe da dire, in questo controsenso. Comunque, andiamo al secondo video che appunto è anche bello lungo. Niente, ho già sproloquiato abbastanza su questo primo video, quindi allora fatemi aggiungere questo qui. Okay. Sicuramente partirà qualche pubblicità dopo 2 secondi, ma va bene. Okay. Via. Qua mi sa che devo abbassare il volume.
Water, a transparent, odorless, tasteless substance that covers over 70% of our planet's surface. A compound that acts as the foundational liquid for all known forms of life. But as basic as it appears to be, water is a versatile liquid. It can be a serene, peaceful thing or an unstoppable and destructive force. Bruce Lee famously said,
Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
and I would really say
questo
the
è proprio
entire human experience has
per
been
dare
shaped over
colore.
thousands and thousands of years by water. Our proximity to it and intrinsic biological dependence on it has given water immeasurable, deep-rooted significance in our collective human DNA. From agriculture, transportation, and medicine to art, entertainment, religion, myth, to say water is important is downright goofy. It's redundant because we are water. So then it's no surprise that many forms of human expression explore, use, represent, feature, or comment on water itself. Books, paintings, plays, movies, poetry, and much, much more recently, video games. Oh yeah, baby. Now this may sound obvious to you, like, yeah, alright, there's water everywhere and in anything. Who cares? What's special about some virtual water? Well, video games, in my humble opinion at least, have the potential to be the pinnacle of human creativity. Key word there is potential. Nearly every art form known to man rolled up into one virtual world, an immersive and interactive experience for you to see, hear, and explore. So naturally, water here too can be a little bit special, mostly because it can be so many different things, look so many different ways, and have a multitude of functions or levels of interactivity. In some games, water has a starring role in the story or themes, and in others it is simply scenery, pretty, refreshing, and cool. But water also can be wielded as a tool of horror and action, perhaps used as a weapon itself or ingredient to craft other items and potions within a specific game. You truly can think of water as like one of those foundational lumps of world-building clay. The game designer is the artist, and it is up to them to morph and utilize it in any way they see fit. But before we go any further with what I'm talking about here, I want to know, right now in the comments, what's the first thing that came to mind for you when you saw the title of this here video? Was it a specific game, a zone, a song, character, item, maybe an absolute booty cheeks level? Well, regardless of what it was, I want to welcome you personally to this video about water and video games, and I'm very excited to share my psychotic ramblings with you on this subject. Okay, lastly, before we get started, I want to thank all of my incredible patrons for supporting me away from YouTube. It really does help me out a ton personally, so thank you, each one of you. I am Ghost, your host as always, and without any further ado, let's quite literally
un'introduzione
dive
anche
in.
abbastanza morbida all'argomento, qui parte una pubblicità, che bello. Eh, 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 eh. Ce la facciamo? Sì, ce la facciamo. Dai.
Well, for me personally, the very first thing that comes to mind when I think of water in video games is graphics. Graphical fidelity has long been one of the constant tracks of innovation in the video game industry. I would say it has historically maybe been #1 for most game companies. A way to always be wowing the public with how real their new game looks on modern hardware, and dating back to the earliest days of gaming to now, water has always been one of the main tools of flexing the newest tech.
And this gives you an example of the overwhelming performance of
Vabbè,
PlayStation
questa
3.
Now, this really makes a
Questa è
ton of sense
clamorosa.
when you think about it. Making convincing looking video game water could
Dai,
theoretically
Docs
require
arriva.
any combination of animation, lighting, textures, physics, color, and whatever other tricks you employ to try to make the stuff look good. Some out there are particularly passionate about their water looking as photorealistic as possible, like this guy right here. He is a total legend on the Wii U little social network. Honestly, I'm kinda on board with the movement. I understand the appeal. I remember the first time I tried to mod Minecraft really hard to make the water look very sexy. It was a strange, confusing, and beautiful experience that took far too many hours away from me and ended up crashing my game irreparably. Great times.
Adesso
But
un
of
bel
course,
video.
over the years, we have seen a sliding scale of water quality. Very early on, all we are really talking about is blue. You gotta look at that and use your imagination. But just a few years later, motion started becoming more of a possibility. And using just a little bit of color and basic animation, the eye could pretty easily be tricked to, at least on a surface level, buy that this is indeed H2O. Soon enough, developers were throwing in more effects like screen wavering, air bubbles, richer blue hues in the background. Like, check out the Donkey Kong Country series, man. You have some incredible 2D magic with really only a handful of things at
questo è un
work. I think
remix di
especially in
Red
some
Dead
of these
Dogs.
early underwater levels, like in the SNES era, there is gorgeous and timeless stuff that looks ethereal and honestly perfect, even now. But when the 3D era arrived, a host of issues presented themselves for video game water. So many resources were going to the character models, the effects, the 3D level assets. It was very difficult to get something challenging like a liquid also up to snuff. Thus, more complex and creative methods were being devised constantly. Nearly every single developer of the era had to really hit the drawing board hard here. Games like Duke Nukem and Quake definitely paved the way with their rather flat but generously animated surfaces swirling around. They added in these sort of lens tints in the water and distance fog to really give the sense that you were in a different space and substance. You know, they say pressure breaks pipes, but it also makes diamonds, baby. And all the hurdles of early 3D graphics led to, honestly, a golden age of progress. The late 90s overall saw massive and rapid innovation. Look no further than a game like Wave Race 64. It
Adesso me lo
utilized a
ricordo
very
bene.
simple system of a
1961.
small grid of triangles. A grid that acted as a physical surface that could be shaken by generated waves off the track with a really nice water animated texture sitting on top of that. But very cleverly, it only loaded the water directly around the player to save on system load, with the rest of the track completely flat until you arrive. This really gave the world possibly the most convincing and pretty 3D water to date, way back in 1996, with all those realistic feeling bumps and waves. But as 3D
Ah,
graphics
molto
continued
bello.
to evolve, reflections, more
più godendivo.
dynamic waves, and lighting were all being improved and added into the equation constantly. Echo the Dolphin, Defender of the Future was another landmark game with water graphics, but under a decade later, games like Crysis were coming out and really pushing the envelope, making honestly photorealistic graphics today back in 2008. I mean, I can't illustrate enough to some of my younger viewers how much this shit just blew people's minds back then. But those
Sì,
decades of
lo
crazy
ricordiamo
fast
tutti.
advancement have had a trickle-down effect, so the knowledge and hardware readily available now leads to a hefty majority of modern video game water to look pretty damn juicy, if I do say so myself. So much so that when a big-time title comes out and it's got some shitty water, that's front-page news in the industry, man. That's embarrassing. But I gotta say, my personal favorite video game water graphically to date
Anche
is
qui siamo
absolutely
su Sea of
in
Thieves,
Sea of Thieves.
ovviamente.
My God,
Vabbè,
I
Sea
know
of
I'm not
Thieves
alone
è
in this. It just
clamoroso.
feels incredibly heavy and powerful and deep, but still catches light at the tips of each wave. It is gorgeous, it's realistic, it's stylized, and I would say it's perfect. But did you know that most of the water textures that exist
Questo
in
è Final
games,
Fantasy
period,
X.
are often just a very simple illusion using normal maps. Normal mapping, if you
Normal Maps
don't
è
know,
quello
is
che
a method of
dicevamo
texture
prima.
mapping that gives something totally and utterly flat the illusion of depth. Scratches, grooves, nicks in wood, rocks on a path. It's just a way to up the detail and fidelity without adding any geometry to the game whatsoever. So for water, it really can be as simple as taking two normal maps and scrolling them in opposite directions, making the surface look as if it is swishing around. But that really is literally just the surface, because another huge key here is caustics, the lighting effect that occurs
Vabbè,
when you are
anche qui
actually
praticamente
looking
dice
into
più
the
o meno le
water
stesse
or
cose del
in the
video di
water,
prima.
giving that all-important crystally atmospheric vibe that we all know and love. And then there's shit like vertex displacement, so you can have big-ass
Anche
waves
questo.
that really feel real. I mean, there is a ton that goes into this stuff. If you want a more comprehensive video on the tech involved, I'm gonna link a few down below that I like, because Lord knows I'm not a technical expert in anything on Earth, but especially not video game development. And to further hammer home the importance of water graphics, just have a little look at the modding community of your favorite moddable game. Chances are, close to the top, you will see various improvements to the water. I really think it is deeply in our little human monkey brains to just enjoy looking at water, right? Just as people flock to beaches and waterfronts to think and appreciate natural beauty, it seems they attempt the very same thing in virtual spaces with virtual beauty. So I
Ecco,
think we can all
questa
agree that
qui
it is a
scusate,
known fact of human
voglio stoppare un attimo, perché secondo me qua c'è un po' la chiave di tutto il discorso. Cioè, perché tanto impegno nella simulazione dell'acqua? Al punto che è verissimo quello che dice lui. Prendete un gioco a caso che ha una grossa community di modder, Skyrim, The Witcher, Fallout, uno qualunque, Minecraft, veramente, qualunque gioco ha una community di modder dietro, avrà una marea di mod che migliorano l'aspetto dell'acqua. E a prescindere poi dai modder in generale, cioè è evidente che c'è una spinta a rappresentare l'acqua in modo credibile nei videogiochi, ma giustamente diceva prima lui, in tutti i mezzi, diciamo, espressivi dell'essere umano, dal libro alla pittura, come io citavo prima Monet, cioè perché? Perché l'acqua in qualche modo diventa, contemplativa, i in tanti sensi contemplativa per l'essere umano, e nel videogioco diventa contemplativa allo stesso modo, quasi a cercare di simulare non solo l'acqua a livello estetico, ma proprio simulare la contemplazione che facciamo davanti all'acqua nella vita reale, nel mondo reale, quasi a volercela far fare anche nei mondi virtuali, anche nei videogiochi dove magari capita. Cioè, ci sono dei videogiochi, magari dei videogiochi open world, esplorativi, dove ti capita di fermarti, soprattutto quando l'acqua è fatta veramente bene. Lui prima faceva vedere Crysis. Crysis ce lo ricordiamo tutti, almeno quelli non proprio giovanissimi ce lo ricordiamo. Crysis ai tempi, oltre ad aver fatto nascere il meme poi vabbè del "ci gira Crysis sul computer", anche quello lasciamo perdere, però al di là di 'ste stronzate, cioè Crysis era una roba clamorosa in quegli anni lì. Non solo nella rappresentazione dell'acqua, ma anche nella rappresentazione dell'acqua. Ehm, e io mi ricordo quanta gente, ma anche io, che comunque Crysis non ci girava sul mio computer Crysis, però ci provavo. Mi ricordo quanta gente si fermava proprio, cioè in realtà Crysis non ci giocavi tanto per giocare a Crysis, ci giocavi per star lì a contemplare. Contemplare la bellezza grafica, che sapeva tanto proprio di futuro, di progresso tecnologico, e chissà che, ma in generale la contemplazione nei videogiochi è un aspetto anche importante, cioè abbiamo visto citare più volte Red Dead Redemption. Quante volte giocando a Red Dead Redemption, soprattutto al 2, ma anche al primo, ci sono stati, cioè c'ho avuto dei momenti di contemplazione, ma giocando a tanti giochi, soprattutto open world, soprattutto giochi dove il viaggio ha un ruolo, per forza, durante il viaggio ti fermi a contemplare, per forza, è matematico. Comunque andiamo avanti col video.
existence that water is pretty. It's calming and cleansing, a crystalline liquid that evokes life, peace, and serenity. And while the stuff itself is surely sparkly and blue, I think when it comes to a video game specifically, really building an
Pubblicità? No,
place and feel, I
no,
think
niente pubblicità, scusate.
really building an atmosphere, a true sense of place and feel, I think music does a majority of the heavy lifting. You could have a busted up ass game visually, but hey man, if the jams are transporting, I'm there baby, I'm all in. Video game music really has always been fascinating to me, especially when it comes to different biomes, climates you may visit within one game. In the desert, it might be like in the forest, some little woods sounding hollow. The volcanoes are always kind of bombastic, like boom, 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 boom. And then there is the water.
Mamma mia.
Oh my god. The way that game composers can capture the sound of an environment and then blend it up with the vibe, the pace of the game, and the graphical style, I mean, it is incredible to me. Amazing. And it's absolutely no secret, no debate whatsoever, that water levels in areas have the best music. Now, unfortunately, the copyright vultures of YouTube are constantly circling, hating on your boy and demonetizing my videos, so I'm not gonna play you anything too risky here, but I do wanna try to squeeze in a couple snippets of my Water Music Hall of Fame, and I hope these are a little bit safer to play than any like Nintendo stuff.
Grant Kirkhope, che ora lavora a Ubisoft Milano, ha fatto i 2 Mario Plus
But so
Rabbids.
much of this stuff, even without knowing the context within the specific game or location in which it plays, has a certain aquatic and watery sound to it. So much so, you could pick it out of a lineup as the water song. So what is going on here? Well, game composers for years have been using various mixing and instrumentation techniques to make these pieces have a certain soft and muffled quality to them. I have always believed this is to mimic what the human ear can actually make out when we ourselves are underwater, more mid and low timbres without all of the fine details. This leads to a very round and soft sound. Also, of course, when we are swimming, things feel slow and smooth, low gravity if you will, so slowing down the tempo of the piece overall, along with that.
Giustamente lui fa un discorso perché le colonne sonore dico è vero che le colonne sonore nei videogiochi tendono ad assomigliarsi, giustamente lui citava la classica colonna sonora del deserto, la classica colonna sonora della foresta, la classica colonna sonora del vulcano e anche quelle dei livelli acquatici tendono ad assomigliarsi. Però al di là del fatto che tendono ad assomigliarsi, ci sono dei motivi ovviamente per cui tendono ad assomigliarsi. Nel caso dei livelli acquatici, il motivo per cui hanno tutti queste sonorità, appunto rilassanti, è legato al fatto che sott'acqua ci sentiamo più lenti, più ovattati e giustamente con queste colonne sonore vanno a simulare in qualche non a simulare, ma come dire, a cercare delle assonanze con quelle sensazioni che proviamo quando siamo immersi nell'acqua.
That already subdued energy can give a really wavy, pulsating, watery effect. But beyond just that technical stuff, steel drums, marimbas, flutes, and drones are all sounds that we as a species associate with beaches, tropical places, bodies of water, and the sun. I would even say most of this stuff has strong links to native oceanic and Caribbean people and their cultures. It seems over the years, global popular media has linked these things permanently, so when anyone hears those tones, the connection is automatic and immediate. There's probably also legit some roots in exoticism, where the faraway and more colorful corners of the world have always been more attractive to us bums stuck in the northern hemisphere. But as I alluded to at the very top of the video, I never want to forget about the other side of the water coin either. The potential darkness, the isolation, the mystery, the danger. Because just as effectively, the music and visuals can combine to create horrifyingly dark aquatic spaces, haunting tones and songs that are reminiscent of Lovecraftian deep-sea creatures or other ancient horrors. I really believe that fear is an underrated aspect of video game water that's just not discussed nearly enough. Listen, I'm no betting man, but I would put down a hefty hunk of coin on the majority of all of you thinking about water levels when you saw the video topic today. And oh boy, you knew it was coming. I am talking about areas within games that are either covered or completely submerged in water. And I would say there are few things more frustrating, more despised, debated, and pored over in the landscape of video game design in the past 30 or so years. Sadly, they have a rather stinky reputation when it comes specifically to gameplay, which really is, let's be honest, the most important aspect to any video game experience. That is because this environment, of course, can change things quite drastically for the player, especially in action games or platformers, because those are genres defined by player movement, and it is not uncommon for these levels and areas to in some way or another slow you down big time. I would say overall, game flow is something that is severely underrated when it comes to designing a cohesive experience. You know when you really want to replay a game that you love a lot, and then you remember that part? Well, I think in many cases, those more loathsome sections are just points where the flow got messed up by one thing or another. It could be grindy gameplay, long, boring story sections, or very possibly a really poopy water level.
Sì, vabbè, penso che il livello della sirenetta, mentre qua mi sa che è partita una pubblicità, ma penso che il livello della sirenetta di Kingdom Hearts 1 sia proprio l'emblema del livello acquatico spaccamaroni, veramente quella roba lì è insopportabile, insopportabile, terribile, terribile veramente, non boh. Forse meglio nel 2 che se non sbaglio c'avevano messo solo le musichette, però vabbè, lasciamo stare. Torniamo qua a Gas Fringe che non so che cosa ci fa. Che poi
Take, for
se non era
example,
Gas
the
Fringe,
very
ma era
first Sonic on the
Gustavo,
Sega
sì,
Genesis,
vabbè,
a
Gustavo.
game literally built around
Giancarlo
nothing but
Esposito,
going
qualche altro
extremely
film.
fast, blazing through levels, collecting rings, and kicking Eggman's ass. It's a great game and an all-time classic for good reason, but a little over halfway through the experience, you will encounter the absolutely horrendous, smelly Labyrinth Zone. My God, I hate it so much. It takes the primary thing you've been doing and says, no, now you move slow, you jump slow, you die slow, and everything's gonna be a horrible, sickly green tint. It pretty much turns the game into a low-gravity frustration simulator, and it is frankly unbearable. Or another great example that I think is underrated in its poopiness is found in Skies of Arcadia, a classic turn-based JRPG that really beautifully captures the spirit of adventure. I love this thing, man. But games in the genre are already known to at times being slow and grindy, especially when they feature random encounters. So when I hit the Mount Kazai area here in game, things somehow took a turn for the even slower. Walking around underwater in this game just feels like shit. You are so slow, and because your speed is going down, the encounter rate seems to double, triple, quadruple based on how much ground you're actually covering. Add in way too many puzzles and other water-themed stuff, it's old the moment you walk in, and it can be a total slog. And that relates, in a way, to possibly the most infamous water level that there is on the Earth. The Water Temple in the Ocarina of Time, a gimmicky horror house of hydration in an otherwise masterpiece of a game. This dungeon consists of raising and lowering water levels. But then you gotta throw on the big iron boots to sink to the bottom, take them off to float back up. The whole time you are moving at a snail's pace, my God. But in all fairness, there are some saving graces. You don't have a breath mechanic because you get the blue t-shirt that lets you breathe underwater. The environment is pretty cool. I don't hate how it looks. And you get to fight Dark Link, so I'll take those three things. But overall, I mean, this is by far the most hated section in possibly the most beloved game of all time, and I think that says something. Then don't even get me started on some of the older retro games that have water levels. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I am looking at you, buddy. But I think beyond those like physical pacing issues that water levels can create, often just comes down to bad controls, right? Frustrating, unnatural, clunky, awkward, or floaty, no pun intended. Some games try to make swimming this constant flowing thing, and in others, it's just a jittery nightmare. And then, how do you want to have your players swim below the surface? Do I hold a button down, or do I swing the stick forward or something? Oh my god. I will say though, my personal least favorite water level or area ever is Vashtir in World of Warcraft. Just absolutely abysmal experience through and through every second. Though it is quite pretty, I'll give it that. And I fully support anyone who enjoys it, but for me, it is literally like my claustrophobic nightmare where you can pull mobs on all sides without realizing it. The fucking seahorse, it just sucks. But wait, hold on a goddamn second. Hit the brakes here on the negativity. Not all water levels are bad. In fact, I would say some of my most favorite areas in certain games are water-themed, and furthermore, I would argue that their reputation has been poisoned by a few bad apples. Okay, way more than a few, but when things are handled properly, these can be some of the most enchanting and enjoyable environments across all video games. When the developers can just keep the controls and the gimmicks reined in to be more in line with the rest of the game's design and flow, very, very special things can surely happen. I think the most obvious success for me in this regard is found in the Donkey Kong Country series, as I mentioned before. Literally, every single game here has, in my opinion, the best 2D water level gameplay and feel by, well, a country mile.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
These games just don't miss. From the early days of the series, it was the atmosphere, music, fluidity that was just perfection. Also, getting to ride a big-ass swordfish is cool. But in the more recent entries, like Tropical Freeze, my god, man, it's the only game I think I've ever played where I actively cannot wait to get back into the water. At times, it feels better and more responsive than the dry sections, which are also fantastic. And that is just because of how quick and smooth the gameplay here becomes. Donkey Kong, my beautiful son, does exactly what I want him to do without fail. No funky gravity, no sluggishness whatsoever, it is just perfectly designed. Or by Nintendo extension, the famous Jolly Roger Bay in Mario 64. So here you are a bit slower and the game flow could theoretically be disrupted, but along with the rest of the majesty that is this game, it works so wonderfully. A sense of space and freedom, exploration, but also some of that darkness and mystery. If anything, it stands out as one of the strongest worlds. It seems to me Nintendo has a much higher success rate with water levels than pretty much every other company out there. But I also want to highlight a pretty underrated water level that I never see people talk about on the internet, and it is from the platformer Alice Madness Returns. This itself is a great game, and I highly recommend it to pretty much everyone, but there's an area known as the Diluted Depths. Just incredible atmosphere, implementation of the aquatic life and themes married in with like the Alice in Wonderland psychedelic stuff, great gameplay, it's fantastic. And maybe my favorite individual water level ever is in Shadow of the Colossus, the 7th Colossus, a giant sea serpent-like beast that acts pretty much as the entire level itself. You are in and out of the water, finding its weak point on its back. Just the sense of movement, scale, and danger is all thanks, in my opinion, to the water and this life that it harbors. It's damn near perfect. But right there with it is also the fishing hamlet in Bloodborne. Some people hate it, but I think it's just because they stink at the game and they can't beat the big street sharks. Wonderful and specific atmosphere is captured here. Everything feels waterlogged, barnacled, over, and moist. You know, it's funny, I think a lot of the games that seem to get these levels or areas right, they just allow water to be a complement to the gameplay, a new lens for you to see the world through, and the underwater sections that work best use the water to liberate you, instead of slowing you down or restricting gameplay in any way. And there are tons others: Sonic Colors, Rayman Legends, Twilight Princess, Banjo-Kazooie, Shovel Knight, Bayonetta. Honestly, now that it comes to it, I think of more that I love than any I hate. Hey, listen, I totally recognize I've mostly been talking about platformers here, but water levels are literally everywhere. RTS, FPS, RPG, racing games like I mentioned Wave Race, or even Hydro Thunder, Mario Kart, Diddy Kong Racing, puzzle games, point and click, you name it. There is likely a water level, area, or stage of some kind. And I think as long as video games are being produced for us to play, they will always be hit or miss, dreadful or pleasant. It seems more like a coin flip than any spectrum of quality to me anyway. But those, my friends, are simply the water levels. What about entire video games that take place in or around the water, where the narratives, from simple to complex, can be tied to it and the natural world? Now this is a whole other beast altogether, but I would say that these experiences do not suffer from the same pitfalls as individual stages or dungeons, and I find some of the best
Vabbè,
use of video game
giustamente,
water
cioè
is in this category.
allora, è chiaro che non so se lo dice dopo, onestamente anche perché qui non c'ero arrivato a questo punto del video. È chiaro che è un gioco, che è incentrato su tutt'altro e che a un certo punto ha un livello subacqueo, non avrà la stessa cura magari che ha negli altri livelli, nel livello subacqueo, cioè è ovvio. Di contro, un gioco pensato per essere tutto subacqueo o quasi tutto subacqueo, o in un certo senso anche un Sea of Thieves che comunque è pensato per essere estremamente legato all'acqua. È chiaro che c'è un focus diverso, una priorità diversa e banalmente i controlli, acquatici del personaggio sono resi in modo migliore perché c'è stato banalmente più lavoro, più cura al dettaglio, eccetera, eccetera, eccetera. È chiaro. Comunque questo video è eccezionale. Io sono cioè ho veramente poco da aggiungere a questo video. Non l'avevo visto tutto, avevo visto metà circa e già m'era piaciuta molto. Ora lo sto rivedendo e devo dire è veramente un video incredibile. Dice secondo me tutto quello che c'è da dire sull'argomento, ehm lo fa anche nel modo giusto, con il giusto humor. Vabbè, ne riparliamo alla fine magari, dai.
So honestly, the game that made me want to make this entire video is Final Fantasy X. Though it doesn't take place like fully in the ocean, it just feels like water, the video game to me, and I think millions of other people. Back in the PS2 era, this game was an absolute visual treat. But for me especially, the cutscenes, man, the water in them just made me incredibly thirsty as a kid. It looks so clear and crystally, and the caustics are really enchanting. And then in-game, those themes are expanded. Everything feels so open, clean, and refreshing. No spoilers, of course, but water also plays a bit of a role as far as the main antagonist, the story, activities on the side, and whatnot. Legends say during development, they gave 3 keywords to every single person working on the project, high and low, to live and create by: time, family, and water. And you can really feel how that affected every cell of development. Those aquatic themes and associations are so strong.
No
I
spoiler,
really
poi ci
think for
mette il
so
bacio
many
tra
people,
Tidus e
video
Yuna.
games act as their sole method of
Insomma.
escapism, a way to forget daily life and stress, to relax and go on a little adventure. And there really is something just so inherently calming about the water. I don't know about you, but I find much more peace in something like Chrono Cross than I do a game set in a more craggy or kind of hostile region. And there's also this weird magical effect that I can't describe, that nostalgia for these wet-ass games just also kind of hits different for some reason. Maybe it depends on where you grew up and what you find attachment to. And on the note of nostalgia, how can I not
vabbè.
mention a game like Legend of Zelda: The
Quando lo
Wind
portano su
Waker,
Switch
which
è sempre
features a
tardi questo.
flooded land of Hyrule, the kingdom sealed away and preserved from evil. It is extremely tied to the ocean in the exact same way. You feel it across every single aspect of the game. You get to boat around, ride the wind, explore tropical islands, port towns, and make friends with pirates. Oh man, pirates, the inhabitants of so many games that take place around the water, furthering those themes of freedom and opportunity on an unending horizon. I mean, dude, the water-themed games list could be super long. Mario Sunshine, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Star Tropics, Contact. There are dozens, if not hundreds more. But maybe the most interesting of them are the ones that actually take place almost completely below the surface. A recent release that stood out big time for me is Subnautica, as it combines survival action gameplay with like exploration on this alien planet's ocean and offers a shit ton of gameplay variation. At times it's relaxing and peaceful, and then others you're absolutely filling your diaper in fear. It's great. Abzu, the Endless Ocean games, Aquaria, Everblue, all of those titles take the challenge head on as far as like swimming and movement being the base of the entire experience. And they are all proof that when you simplify that shit, the gameplay and environment and exploration can really shine. But then, oh my god, what about the games that take place underwater but in a structure of some sort? Soma, Barotrauma, Bioshock. These titles really utilize the claustrophobia and oppressive fear that water can bring. I'm talking true isolation on the sea floor, miles from sunlight, open air, or any help. This, my friends, is the perfect setting for horror. And if not horror, danger at least. Because although it is pretty, the ocean and even lakes and rivers can be absolute minefields of deadly marine life, waiting in the depths for a snack that is conveniently human-shaped. Man, I could go on listing random-ass games, but it's honestly not really the point of this video. So let's move on to a few more, I guess you could say, specific uses.
Guarda, BBVA offre un deposito.
Pubblicità. Okay.
So I want to know, what can water do in a more targeted way? How can it be used for a singular function? Now this of course could mean a few things, but I think maybe the most common is water being a boundary. And I think there's no feeling worse than seeing a body of water in a video game and thinking to yourself, sweet, let's see if I can swim, and then you can't. But hey, you gotta admit that water is possibly the most effective way to block off areas to players, or give a more natural feeling to the edge of the game map so you avoid any sort of invisible wall bullshit. And in this same vein, it can also act as a legit hazard, alligator infested or otherwise dangerous, an obstacle meant to instantly end your character's life upon contact. Some instances, it might as well be lava you're falling into. More of these characters need to take some damn swimming lessons, man. But boundaries, in some cases, are meant to be broken, and there are instances of water being something that you can traverse once you acquire a certain item or power. And this I like. It's a really nice way to give the player a feeling of unlocking a new aspect to the world and expanding their range of exploration as they progress. But there are also various tools of the aquatic nature, things we can harness and use for gameplay purposes. Now, I know it's never explicitly called water, but the system of mana has always been closely tied to it, linked to the themes of life, power, and energy. So many games use systems of magic and elements, different sorts of damage, status effects, and spells. Now remember again the very wise words of Bruce Lee, and there are plenty of times in video game history you can dip into your well of weaponry and grab some high-quality H2O strap. Something like the Elementalist class in Guild Wars 2, or even characters in like League of Legends or other MOBAs absolutely use water to kill people. But the one that really comes to mind here for me, honestly, is Pokemon, an entire type dedicated to water with dozens and dozens of water-themed creatures and moves. A few of those moves are utility-based, but surprisingly, the majority are simply meant to destroy your opponent. Hydro Pump is probably one of the most famous and most powerful moves in the history of the series. And Pokemon has done a vast amount of exploration of sea life and its design of these little buggers over the years. Sharks, fish, eels, starfish, fucking SpongeBob. Then there are the strengths and weaknesses in-game. It's most effective against rock, fire, and ground, which all makes sense to me, I accept, but it gets slapped hard by electric and grass. Now electric, I'll give it to you. But grass? That always kind of was a head scratcher to me as a kid. Like, don't you need me to live, Mr. Plant? Don't bite the hand that feeds you. I can kill you if I decide to cut you off. And all those elemental weaknesses and strengths definitely bleed over to dozens of other games. Then you got the countless number of sandboxy games that allow water to be like this object of experimentation and fun. This is most often where it is explored as far as physics, interactivity, and even science. I mean, goddamn, man. I got completely overwhelmed while making this video, realizing just how many different ways you could both thematically and practically use the damn stuff. It's staggering. Alright, so now I just want to chill out a little bit and talk about a few leftover examples that didn't totally fit into any of the other sections. Just some more video game water that I think is cool. And the first is in Amnesia Dark Descent, actually. A classic horror game at this point that has you bumbling around this dark castle, losing your damn mind, trying to solve puzzles and regain your memory while these monsters are chasing you down to kick your ass. Well, at a certain point, you reach the Cellar Archives section. Sounds spooky enough already, but the rooms and hallways are flooded, and you are encouraged to kind of hop on these floating boxes and pieces of debris to make your way through. That is, of course, when the monster appears, but completely invisible. all you have to go off is these
Terrificante.
trudging, splashing footsteps through the water.
Mamma
Let
mia.
me tell you firsthand, it is a great way to build dread and tension. Complete silence being broken by quickening soggy steps behind you is absolutely enough to make you pee-pee your
Mamma mia,
pants.
Cool
terrificante.
water.
Now next isn't a particular game, but another form of water altogether that we haven't talked about yet.
La
Rain.
pioggia.
Weather at large is a wonderful tool for furthering
La
that
pioggia, subito ho
atmosphere
pensato a
and
Breath
mood,
of the
and over the
Wild
years there have been
e a
some
come
utterly
fa anche, non
fantastic
so,
rain systems
in
put in
game della
place.
pioggia,
Batman
non solo
Arkham
grafico.
Knight really stands out for me, but so does Red Dead Redemption 2, and shocker, Cyberpunk 2077 actually has some phenomenal rain. I give you your flowers, CD Projekt Red. But an absolute shocker, as far as the top tier in this regard, is Homefront: The Revolution. I know, what is that? It's a pretty
No, no,
average
io
to
me lo
shitty
ricordo,
game,
ci
to
ho
be honest, but
giocato.
the rain is unmatched in the way that it speckles the ground really slowly before turning the entire surface wet. This was probably an obscene amount of extra work that no one needed to do. No one was expecting this, but it is awesome. And this game is nearly 7 years old.
Cool water.
Another thing I have neglected to mention to this point is sports games, and I guess more specifically, water sports. So we mentioned racing, but I'm also talking about fishing, surfing, swimming, or water skiing. This subgenre definitely has had a little bit of time in the sun as well, and there are a few gems definitely buried in there. Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer, made by the people who made the original Tony Hawk games, is actually a really good time, especially if you enjoy surfing. But I would say overall, these are often used as little mini games or side activities in larger things. Fishing and MMOs, Mario Party mini games, you get the idea.
Cool water.
But you know, I'm feeling like I want to get really negative again really quick to balance things out here, so how about possibly the most atrocious video game I have ever played in my entire life to completion, full stop, Aquaman on the GameCube. I legitimately would not wish this experience on my worst enemy. It is, oh man, somehow everything is bad. Controls, level design, combat, hell, they even fucked up the music, which is inexcusable. It's the worst water game, worst water world, worst water man, worst everything. Throw it in the bin and burn the house down, then put the fire out with some better video game water.
Really shit water.
Okay, I'm calm. I'm good. And I think overall, I have made my point with this video. You can see how many different ways water has been used in the industry over the years. And please do remember that I am only ever scratching the surface. Contrary to what many people seem to think, I'm not a video game library. I'm in fact just one single dude, and I'm most often just drawing from my own experience when it comes to videos like this. But if there is a takeaway, a lesson, I think it's that water has a ton of power in our virtual spaces. It can enchant us with its beauty, take us on wild thrill rides, heal our wounds, frustrate us with its sluggishness, and then make us fall back in love all over again with its ethereal and dreamy musical themes. Water is so closely tied to our human experience that eventually it becomes an afterthought, a given of these games and worlds. But I do think it serves us well to slow down every now and again to try to appreciate not only the crazy amount of work that goes into these things, but also the vast array of implementations across the history of this creative medium. So now I really want to hear from all of you guys. What are some of your favorite water graphics, levels, games, songs, and atmospheres? What are some cool, unique uses for video game water that I missed? How many times did I say water in this entire video? Let me know down below. You know, I usually wrap up with sort of a poetic conclusion that weaves everything really neatly together, but this time, I think we should all just chill right here a while. Until next time, everyone. Peace.
Allora, io penso sinceramente che questo sia uno dei video più belli che abbiamo visto su Dissidenza. Sinceramente, cioè veramente un video, ve lo linko subito, ma secondo me è veramente un video eccezionale. Ripeto, ne avevo visto metà, m'era piaciuto, non pensavo fosse così bello. Io penso che adesso questo canale qui lo andrò a spolpare per bene, perché lui è veramente bravo. Secondo me lo rivedremo su Dissidenza Critica perché, insomma, mi è piaciuto un casino. Ah, tra l'altro questo è proprio il suo penultimo video, possibile? Effettivamente 4 mesi fa, sì, mi sa che dopo ha fatto solo un video su Luigi. così. No, ma questo content creator lo rivediamo sicuro perché boh, cioè perché è fighissimo, fighissimo, il video è eccezionale, veramente seriamente poco da aggiungere. Ehm Boh, vi ripeto, ha detto tutto lui. Ha esplorato tutti i generi, che c'erano secondo me da esplorare, citando tutta la roba che c'era da citare, facendo tutto un discorso sui vari modi di rappresentare l'acqua nei videogiochi, sia in termini estetici, grafici, sia in termini, ludici. Ha spaziato veramente tra le generazioni, tra il 2D, il 3D, ehm boh, io non veramente un video incredibile, veramente, veramente bello. Tra l'altro incarnava perfettamente quello che voleva essere questa serata, questo episodio di Dissidenza Critica. Cioè, oggi ad esempio su Instagram sotto al post un ragazzo ha scritto: "Non ho capito la tesi del post". Non c'era una tesi del post, cioè il mio post non voleva dire: "I livelli acquatici sono tutti belli" o "I livelli acquatici sono tutti brutti", cioè non c'è un punto d'arrivo. Quello che volevo fare con questa serata era più che altro girare attorno all'acqua nei videogiochi, intesa sia come rappresentazione dell'acqua nei videogiochi, sia come, ehm dimensione del videogioco, nel senso che comunque anche l'esplorazione acquatica fa proprio parte, cioè è proprio una delle dimensioni in cui i videogiochi ci portano. In certi casi più che in altri, in certi casi meglio che in altri. E semplicemente, trovo che sia troppo deprecata l'idea dell'acqua in generale nei videogiochi, soprattutto per l'idea dei livelli acquatici nei videogiochi. E lo capisco perché appunto troppo spesso, dei videogiochi che sono evidentemente votati ad altro, a un certo punto sentono il bisogno di buttarci in mezzo un livello acquatico, tendenzialmente facendolo in modo, sciatto, senza curare davvero le cose, e vengono fuori dei livelli che spessissimo sono una palla al cazzo. D'accordo. Però è anche vero poi dall'altro lato che ci sono state e ci sono tuttora delle rappresentazioni dell'acqua nei videogiochi, anche proprio per dire, lui prima ha citato, ed è un gioco clamoroso, Zelda Wind Waker. Cioè Zelda Wind Waker è, il ribaltamento di tutto quello che era stato Zelda fino ad allora, ehm, andando a fare una cosa, totalmente nuova, cioè proprio andando ad allagare il mondo e rendendo il mondo un insieme di isole. Una cosa che se ci pensate tuttora, cioè a parte qualche gioco come appunto Black Flag, come Sea of Thieves, cioè non è una cosa che poi si è vista tanto spesso e comunque non si è rivista per un botto di tempo, quel tipo di esperienza lì in cui sei di fatto un marinaio e va per la sua strada in questo grande oceano. Tra l'altro m'ha fatto pensare a Swordship di cui ho fatto la recensione l'altro giorno. Ehm, cioè veramente ci sono stati dei giochi nel tempo che hanno fatto cose con l'acqua incredibili, ma anche lo stesso Sea of Thieves che dico: "Okay, adesso è abusato ormai negli ultimi anni, quando si parla d'acqua nei videogiochi si finisce sempre a parlare di Sea of Thieves", sia per la sua rappresentazione, sia per proprio come e quanto fa ruotare la sua esperienza di gioco attorno all'acqua, in tutti i sensi possibili. Però resta il fatto che è un gioco incredibile nel fare questa cosa qua, nel rendere proprio l'acqua una dimensione, esplorabile, ammirabile, cioè proprio è in un certo senso è proprio il videogioco sull'acqua ad oggi. Cioè proprio se volete un videogioco sull'acqua, niente in questo momento è meglio che giocare un po' di tempo a Sea of Thieves. Ma dico, ripeto, il video è stato, anche oltre le mie aspettative, ehm, boh, non posso che dirvi che cioè io personalmente forse la serata di Dissidenza Critica che ha avuto meno pubblico da quando faccio Dissidenza Critica, neanche le prime serate dell'anno scorso c'era così poco pubblico e questo un po' mi dispiace, più che altro perché secondo me è venuta una puntata piuttosto figa, non tanto per merito mio che alla fine ci ho messo molto poco, quanto perché il video era veramente eccezionale, dava i giusti spunti, boh, sono molto contento della riuscita. Spero insomma che per chi c'è stato sia stata una serata piacevole. Spero magari che qualcuno in differita su YouTube recuperi il video e boh, direi che ce ne possiamo anche andare a fanculo. Io vorrei raidare, se riesco, datemi un attimo, vorrei raidare Dungeon Dice, dove ci sono il buon Mario Cortese e il buon Ruger. Incredibilmente c'è anche Ruger. Se riesco gli facciamo il raidino, questi pochi che siamo. Datemi un secondo. Eh, 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 eh. Allora. Dungeon Dice TV. Ok, il raid è stato creato. Va bene ragazzi, vi ringrazio ancora per chi mi ha seguito. Ci vediamo, vabbè, lunedì c'è il podcast, non so se domenica si fa il Ti Mangio in Faccia. Comunque in ogni caso, lunedì podcast, settimana prossima dovrebbe esserci live sia martedì, sia mercoledì, sia giovedì, incredibilmente proprio settimana prossima pienissima. Detto questo, punto esclamativo Telegram anzi ve lo scrivo anche in chat, punto esclamativo Telegram per unirvi sul gruppo Telegram, incredibile, ha funzionato, e punto esclamativo Patreon per venirci a dare dei soldi ed entrare nel gruppo Patreon e abbonati Twitch. Detto ciò, vi saluto, salutatemi Mario e salutatemi Ruger e non so chi altri c'è in live con loro. Ciao!